So hi, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on scaling impact startups with lean design and tech. My name is Marie Genest. I'm the founder of the C Collective. We're a consultancy all about designing innovation for people and planet. And yeah, thanks for making the time today to reflect on your impact entrepreneur journey with our panel. Looking at the chat and the registrations, what we have in the rooms, we have some designers, we have some tech experts, and also leaders working at different stages of the entrepreneurship journey. Some people are at maybe early stage, some people are at scale-up stage, and some people may be working on bringing innovation in more mature organizations. There's probably a couple of things that you may have in common. First, you're driven by a willingness to scale your social and environmental impact. And second, you probably have limited resources and time to make it happen. So you need probably pragmatic, actionable, and resourceful advice. So with that in mind, this is what we'll be talking about today. So we want to look at what a successful scale-up looks like in the impact space. And as you scale, we want to explore how you can ensure that you continue delivering that exceptional user and product experience while maintaining your impact. Then we'll go into the heart of the conversation around why and how lean tech approaches and solutions can power your innovation and accelerate your growth. And then what are the most common engineering and design pitfalls? And last but not least, what are the trends emerging in the impact space, in particular AI? And also we'll explore the topic of teams. How can your design, product, and tech teams work together seamlessly to navigate the challenge of scaling? So without further ado, let's crack on and hear what our panel have to say. Today, I have the pleasure to welcome three panelists, three experts from the world of product, design, operations, and tech. So welcome, Rashmi, Joe, and Josh. And let's do quick intros. Oh, I forgot to mention that this is being recorded. And yeah, of course, as you probably have already done, please feel free to mute yourself so that we have a smooth session. And there will be Q&A at the end, but feel free to drop your questions in the chat from now on. Okay, so I'm going to start with Joe. So Joe, you might have understood, is my colleague at the C Collective. So you're our experience director, and essentially your job is about driving user-centered practice in the design space through meticulous research and robust design thinking methods. And you focus on what matters to people and planet. So Joe, can you tell us a bit more with that context in mind of the work you do with scaling impact businesses?
Yes, thanks, Marie. A bit of background, 15 years, well, probably a bit just over that now, losing count, in the industry, start web design and product design, and then use research. So the last 10 years or so, quite focused on startups and helping them identify their ideal customers, unmet needs through user research, and then helping them to find the value proposition for their products and then bringing the experiences to life. Last 5 years, definitely focused on mainly health tech. It's been a big part of into the scale up my work, and that's definitely slightly different from startups in terms of focused on helping them cut through the noise in terms of user data and research to identify the real kind of insights they need to further grow, and prioritizing that work then for the team in terms of building the right thing and helping sometimes with the execution in terms of the product design. So yeah, that's kind of my background.
Thanks, Joe, and thanks for being here. Yeah, Rashmi, could you also tell us a bit more? So you're a product delivery lead at Data Truth. And so this is why you team up with visionary leaders to scale their impact by delivering AI, digital tools, and platforms. So what is your involvement with impact entrepreneurs scaling up? And maybe you can also give us a bit more context about what you guys do at Data Truth.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. Really nice to be here today. I am indeed Rashmi. I am the product delivery leader at Data Truth. I've been helping people create digital tools now for around 15 years. 15 years seems to be the magic number on this panel. What I really enjoy, I guess, is the process of bringing things to life from a blank canvas and marshalling teams to success. And I think at Data Truth, we've worked mostly in the positive impact space, teaming up with ambitious change makers, aiming to build platforms for purpose, whether it's building sustainability tools in the finance sector or designing and creating health and well-being apps. We help really navigate and accelerate the path to success. And we often step in when leaders say, I don't know where to start, or I don't know where to go next. And it's really about, knowing what to do next and guiding people on that path. And examples of what we've done in the impact space. So one example is helping a company in America build and design an ESG data collection tool, and their mission was really to create a more conscious form of capitalism in the private market. So that's one example. Another one is we are the technical hand for a global thought leader in the circular economy space. So we help them to accelerate the global transition to a circular economy by using tech. Really nice to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Rashmi. And Josh, so you're also working at Data Truth, and you're the lead technical solution architect. And you got loads of experience in anything from tech strategies, software engineering, data, and AI across multiple of positive impact businesses. So yeah, same question. What is your experience with scaling impact businesses?
Absolutely. Thank you, Marie. So great to be here. So yeah, also 15 years experience, more or less, in the world of software engineering and data. The last 5 years really has been in the positive impact tech space. So that's been everything from mental health through ESG and to the circular economy and everything that sits around that as well. So really my interest and my passion is about using technology to solve complex problems and things that really help to improve the world and help people. So yeah, nice to be here.
Great. So that's a great panel. So now let's go into the conversation. And maybe we can start simply by defining a bit more what we mean by startup and scale up. I think we have an illustration that's quite good on the next slide. Well, that kind of says it all. But it's very good at summarizing the key stages and differences between startup and scale up. So on the left-hand side, you have the startup stages, and it's really about proving the viability of your business model, achieving impact, and the sort of holy grail of product market fit. And of course, you have to secure the funding that is required to support you all through the way and maybe to the next stage. So once you've achieved this and crossed this gap here, what does a success scale-up look like in the impact space, and what are the key steps to get there? So maybe let's start with the tech perspective with Josh.
Absolutely. So yeah, I guess from tech perspective, really as the team and the business grows, it becomes increasingly important to increase coordination and to ensure things are being prioritized effectively. And also implementing just enough process to ensure that you're getting things done, but without being burdensome. And one of the things that I say is most important as you're growing and scaling is increasing discipline. And becoming a little bit more disciplined with things, whereas in a startup you might be a little bit less strict with how you're running things. As you grow, you definitely want to start being a bit smarter about it.
Right. And Joe, from a design and research practice, how does a scale-up look?
Yeah, well, from a research perspective, I think a successful scale-up is still really speaking to their customers regularly. I think it's often something gets distracted, or you focus on the quant data and the quantitative data coming through, but they forget sometimes to, you still need to be in that mode of speaking to customers regularly, face to face, observing them, and then from, as Josh was saying, in terms of processes, probably professionalizing the way you handle that data, handle the research, where it's stored, and allowing other team members to access that, and then design systems and all that are maturing on that path. So yeah, it's kind of the main shift.
Okay. And if we if we look at the bigger picture, I'd say, how do you actually future-proof your vision and business model in the complex context that we have, and also to deliver that impact?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for the how we work, at least in C Collective, and I think it's probably the best way to do it is actually from the start. I mean, it's not something, it's hard to do in that chasm change, and you really need to inbuild it from the start. And there's a few models we use, which is sort of systemic, looking at systemic process, making sure that tech is feasible, viable, and desirable. I mean, classic kind of product and service development, but also that that's responsible, which is also important for people in the school and impact entrepreneurs, and then focusing on making sure that the work is there. We also use a slight adaptation on the lean product strategy, which is again making sure that things are, you've got the right target customer, you're meeting unmet needs, you're thinking about social environmental impact, which is a really key thing to map, and then looking at the value proposition to make sure there's impact product fit before, so you can move forward. And that's still relevant for scale ups. It's still in that lean mode, and I think it's difficult. The difference between impact entrepreneurs and maybe traditional startups is that those are really focused on purely growth, almost growth at all costs, and obviously different with the impact entrepreneurs is that social and environmental layer. And to keep that mapping going, we also use the donut economics framework, and that really does future-proof the business in terms of constantly making sure that through the product lifecycle and through the user lifecycle, you're constantly looking at the social shortfall in what you're doing and the environmental overshoot, and making sure that what we're doing is as responsible as possible. It's not always a perfect picture you can to create, but it's really making sure that you're thinking about it through every single stage from the get-go, and then it's always easier when you get to scale up those systems around it.
Great, thank you. That's really useful framing of the definitions and the stages. But I still have a question: is how do you actually know when it's time to start thinking about scaling and to start scaling? Are there any signs out there?
I'm happy to jump in on
Yeah.
this one, Marie. I think it's definitely about recognizing the tipping point. For sure, I would say there are kind of 3 signals to be aware of. We definitely recognize this when we helped one startup move to scale up and then at enterprise level, and we did that within a couple of years. And kind of the 3 signals were, one, you are solving the same problem over and over again. So you're delivering the same value, but to multiple different customers. And every time you do it, you feel like you're starting from scratch. And kind of the sign there is, gosh, I have to do this thing again, and I wish I could just do that automatically. And that's usually the sign that things need to be systemized right now. You're delivering value, it's amazing. You're not in experimentation mode anymore. You know what works, and so you can continue to you can systemize that now. 2, I think it's when you're using too much glue to fix things. So you're continuing to, I mean, in a startup, that's absolutely fine and expected. You don't have any testing frameworks, or that's unlikely anyway. But when you move into scale up, and you're still fixing things on an ad hoc level, you start to actually create an error-prone system. And we see that in software quite a lot with an accumulation of technical debt. And I think especially in kind of impact spaces where you need to be adaptable to change. For example, with one climate tech company, very much reliant on regulation and metrics changing year on year, we were, it was really important for us to build a modular, scalable data model that evolved with regulatory changes over time. And so, doing things in a controlled environment rather than ad hoc becomes apparent. And I think number 3 is really noticing when the team doesn't feel as aligned as it once was. I've got a slide on that one, which I'll just share. And that is really when you start to grow the team, but you do it in a way where you're growing a single team, and things just start to feel like people start to go off in silos. And you can see Brooke's law here, which is as you introduce more and more people into the loop, there are more and more lines of communication, and that adds a ton of complexity to projects. And over here on the right, you can see as you introduce the people, actually productivity goes down, which is not what you always think, but I've seen it happen where you're hiring really too fast. You can't integrate them fast enough. You can't onboard or facilitate that change, and so that's another key signal.
All right, so look out for the signs. That's the idea. So moving on now into the core of our topic is we'd like to dive into how lean strategies ensure you continue delivering exceptional user experience while your user base is actually growing. And you do this while maintaining that net positive impact or even increasing that net positive impact. So maybe, Joe, you can enlighten us on how to achieve this. Oh, you're on mute, Joe.
Sorry, the kids were screaming. Yeah, so particularly from a research and design perspective, at least, I think most people are aware now that great experiences are born out of really deep understanding of the user base, and the early startups. You're probably constantly talking to customers. I think at a scale up stage, when that number is a lot bigger, there's a lot more data, that intimacy between the team and the customer can fade a bit. And you risk focusing on just sort of feature delivery or service planning and not actually talking to customers. And it's hard then also to cut through the noise. You get a lot of data and it's really hard to, where do I start getting through this? And I think the problem's born out a little bit that at scale ups, you kind of focus on scaling maybe tech or scaling product side, but they don't scale the actual insight system and how to gather that and how to hold that data and where to share it and how to share it and how to prioritize it. And I think you end up chasing a bit the feedback loops and get caught out by the loudest customers that are shouting at you about things they want, and maybe could push you in a direction that is wrong in terms of growth. And I think that it's really a shift in mindset, a little bit of how to isolate those customers that are most needed to talk to and to observe. And I think the methods don't change. I mean, you still need to do user interviews, get on the calls, get on email and speak to them, surveys, of course. Observing is a really powerful one. I think if you at a scale up stage, getting out and actually just watching people, especially if it's a physical service you're providing or service that is quite complex in terms of climate tech, really go out and observe that as a key one. That's one we do quite regularly with field visits ourselves in the team. And then in terms of using that in terms of lightweight, you can do that quite lightweight teams, lightweight personnel in terms of going out and actually recording that, video sessions of doing that observation work. And then in terms of prioritizing that work, it's kind of focusing on not only does it work, which is probably where you're focused on in terms of startup, or does it deliver the outcome we want, but actually focus on, does it also improve the people and planet, the original vision that you probably had for the product. And that's a bit of a deeper work to do in terms of reviewing that. But at scale up stage, when you're moving that chasm, it's really key to review that and make sure that's still in sight, and then making sure you empower the team to have curiosity and for them to come to the team and actually come back with insights. Can get stuck with only focusing on the surveys and the data you're getting in, but allow the team to also to bring insights as a key one.
Right. Okay, that's super insightful. Thanks, Joe. And yeah, same question on the tech processes and solutions that can be used to power your innovation and accelerate your growth. Rashmi, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. Lean tech approaches. I mean, a couple of approaches come to mind. I would say both are underpinned by a lean product delivery mindset. And the first one is always start with an everything is a template mindset. Whether it's a discovery cheat sheet, a kickoff flow, or a Three Amigos template. For me, templates really are an accelerator. And I usually at the start of every project ask myself, what are the ingredients to success for this project? Thinking of it as a recipe. If I think something's missing, I usually say, right, let's find a template for this. And it's being able to create master abstracted out versions of things, and that kind of small habit moves you from startup to scale up mindset, and it also moves you from starting everything from scratch and moving into a zone where you're doing things incrementally, improving as you go, which is getting rid of throwaway delivery culture from startup to really more circular and sustainable design systems. And I'd say the second one is leaning on powerful prioritization techniques. For me, like scoping effectively, especially in the impact space, is critical. especially as resources are kind of far and in between. So old is gold. We use the Moscow approach. I've been with Data Truth for about 7 years now, and we've been using the Moscow ever since. And that really is, if you're not familiar with it, dividing tasks up into must have, should have, could have, and won't have. And I do this with a bit of a twist. So we start off with a bunch of tasks and we put them all in the won't have columns. And then we gamify the experience a bit. So, working together, we all have to convince each other as to why that item actually belongs in the must-have. So it really keeps us focused on the value that we're trying to create for the customers. And another way to look at it, I guess, is we're not packing for a holiday, we're packing for a mission. So that means not bringing 3 pairs of shoes just for the sake of it. Although I know I have been known to do that before. But you really, you just need to bring what you need to complete the job.
Right. Love that. I'd say, so upcycling templates, and recycling them as much as possible. And also this concept of less is more, which is very much aligned with sustainability. Great. So this brings another question. So how do you manage, between in software development, there's a lot to do. How do you manage to prioritize speed versus long-term sustainability? And Josh, this is a question naturally for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a great question. I mean, really, sustainability in software engineering is about building software that's going to remain maintainable over its lifespan. Code bases, they're always being rewritten and renewed. So year to year, they're not going to be the same kind of code base. Very much like the human skeleton, which renews itself something like every 10 years. Software lifespans, though, can actually be pretty short. So that can be in the order of months to years, as opposed to years to decades. And that's particularly in younger businesses. And with AI writing more code at the moment, it's definitely becoming possible to create truly disposable code bases. So these are code bases or software that's built for a single purpose and then scrapped. So an example of that would be building a prototype, something that you're going to use to demo a concept or an idea to a client, perhaps. But once it's done that job, you're going to throw it away, and that's the end of it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you always want to default to speed and throw maintainability out the window. In some cases, it's really better to go extreme on the maintainability and quality side of things. For example, airplane autopilot is a good example of that. Flood defense systems, electricity grids. I mean, you can just ask Spain about their recent experience with the electricity grid going down. It's the kind of thing you really need to work all the time. But essentially, as a business scales up, the lifespan of that software, of the software they're building, the products they're building, is likely to increase. So as the business grows, you probably want to increase the focus on ensuring that the software you are building is more and more maintainable as you go along.
Okay, great. So it's expanding the lifespan of your software, also a good principle. So now let's go into maybe some concrete examples. I'm also interested in understanding what are the maybe common pitfalls that product engineering teams and design teams can encounter, and also, so what have you observed in your practice, and especially in this critical phase of transitioning to scale up? Rashmi, do you want to start?
Yeah, thank you. Happy to. One of the major pitfalls, I think, as you start to scale up, is the falling into the build it all now trap, and trying to gold plate everything. We've all been there. I think the scaling journey is a really exciting one to be in, and it's really easy to get carried away in that and really want to deliver all the value at once. But I just say, take a step back, take stock, and release the FOMO a bit. And I think that's what it comes down to, delivering as little and as often as possible. And that really is, there is a focus on learning. There's 3 signals to look out for, I think. Be mindful of always saying yes to everything, scoping features around ideas rather than actual value outcomes, and hiring faster than you really can facilitate. And we've seen it in climate tech companies where people hire in fast, as I've said before, and it actually has the opposite effect on delivery. It's actually slowed down things a fair bit. So I'd say that's a big pitfall, really. Falling into that. Let's just try and do everything at once.
And Josh, are there any other ones that you see while leading engineering teams?
Yeah, definitely. So I've got a little diagram here actually to help illustrate this. So this is just a regular bell curve that you can see on the screen here. It's a pretty simplistic model, but essentially what we're showing here is the classic build versus buy conundrum. You've got buy on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, we've got build. But these are obviously the extreme ends of the spectrum. Generally, we see that most projects probably should have a mix of both. So you're going to have some components or aspects that are going to be bought in and some that would be custom built. And that's what allows cost, speed, and solution fit to be balanced. Because we typically see two common failure modes when building out products or software. And that's essentially that either you go to one extreme on the left here where you're buying everything in, and that might be that you're trying to stitch together a whole bunch of no code or low code tools, or going to the other extreme is where you're trying to build everything from scratch, which again is another common failure mode. Obviously, there's legitimate cases where you're going to want to prioritize one side over the other. But if you go to the extreme, they tend to end up being pretty costly. I mean, it's better to focus on custom building the aspects of your product and software that give unique value and a competitive advantage in your particular space, because you don't want to be spending time reinventing the wheel, and you don't want to be spending time fighting with software that doesn't really fit the need that you've got.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. And Joe, does everything always goes to plan in the beautiful world of design, or are there also some pitfalls to be mindful of?
Short answer, no. Yeah, I think the common sort of pitfall, I suppose, is seen, which can lead to quite big problems. It's pretty like scaling for the impact is all about isn't about doing more, it's about doing better with what you've got, and without losing what made you different in the first place. That's obviously quite a hard problem sometimes for when you're scaling up. But a compromise I see is it's more of a mindset, and not to point fingers, but I think founders always stay too close to that they are the user. I think that works as in early startups. Usually founders having a deep knowledge of the market, they may have lived experience of the thing that the product and service they're bringing to market, and that works for quite a long period to get to that impact market fit. I think the issue there is that as you start to scale, and if you're still too deep in terms of designing the actual product or the service, you end up getting a bit lost potentially in the fog of all the insights and all the feedback you're getting. Again, you tend to react to the loudest customers, which came to earlier, and you're still kind of chasing that growth based on earlier kind of processes, and it's actually taking a step back because ultimately, if you're still see yourself as a user, that can lead to quite a lot of feature creep, muddled experiences that are a bit of a mishmash of lots of different things, and ultimately potentially dilutes the impact that you're trying to make, the positive impact at the end of the day. A ways around that is kind of framing yourself as a steward of the vision, and not micromanaging the product, trying to lose the I am the user mindset a little bit. It takes time, but it's definitely a mindset to change, and avoid chasing every request that you get from users, and really focus on the customers that made you a success and made you grow. So the top 10, what we say is focus on the top 10 customers that you would clone if you could, that really match, firstly are loyal, haven't been incentivized to use your product or service in the first place, but really align with it and align with your values fully, and really focus on interviewing them, observing them using your product service, and understanding exactly what made them stay around in the product and service you're offering, and pay for it and use it, and build a library of insights around them, the moments that matters for them, the things that they would change, the things they need. And of course, you don't react to everything they say, but it's definitely the key users to focus on. An example of that was health tech startup that's kind of scaling up now. They were struggling a little bit with the fog and insights, which ones to follow. They had quite a few loud customers that were a bit too close, I would say, to the founder in terms of the relationship they had built over the years they were growing. And we just changed their onboarding flow a little bit in the app they had, and asked put two more questions in there, which focused on why they're coming and what was the biggest challenge they were facing. We saw no percentage drop in the onboarding success, which was a key thing we did want to obviously affect. But it actually gave a lot of insight for the founder to just to reframe a little bit what initially he had thought about why customers were coming to him or to the product and service. And after doing that work, we had interviewed the top 10 customers as well, and came back to me and said, oh, literally his words were, wow, we were making the wrong assumptions, which is really him, in terms of decision making. And he said we really believed our own BS, which was quite important to change that, again, that trigger in his mind of changing his mindset. And they gave a lot of clarity on the marketing messaging they needed to do, and then what actually key things they needed to change to grow, or in what features they could drop because they weren't important anymore, which is key in terms of cutting the fat of the experience. Right.
So don't take your assumptions on users' needs for granted, and verify them and prioritize them ruthlessly as you grow. Great, thanks, Joe. So in terms of further tips, do you have any like lightweight but like mighty processes that have been introduced and pay dividends when scaling? And maybe we'll get that back to Rashmi.
Yeah, sure. So one process, I think it comes back to what you were saying, Joe, about doing things that actually matter. One process for me that I absolutely love, and we use it all the time here, especially important for mission-driven businesses, and this is the why session. And it's easy to overlook, especially when you're moving really fast. But some might even think that it's fluffy. But for me, the biggest accelerator is not. It's an accelerator in scaling a business is not speed, it's actually alignment. So before kicking off any product or product sprint or feature, we actually ask ourselves a few questions. Why are we doing this and why now? How is this going to be beneficial for the end user, and how do we know? And how do we link this back to business requirements? And after that 1 to 2 hour session, I just summarize it all and I send it back to the whole team via Slack or wherever people are living, Notion. And actually that really sets the tone and direction for the value that we're trying to create. And that 2 hours can really save a 2-month detour, or even worse, getting the product completely wrong. And when the team has that kind of clarity, I really notice postures in the room change. They become more purposeful and just happier teams in general, more engaged. Engineers not all going off trying to answer these questions by themselves, which is a daunting experience. So, this really helped, and it also improves velocity.
Right. So linked to that, Rashmi, you mentioned the Moscow prioritization, which I suppose comes out of the why. You're dead right in terms of asking the whys. How do you make sure that the should and could kind of move to maybe must or just won't? Because sometimes get stuck a little bit in my experience.
That's a really good question, and we've all been there, right? We come out of a Moscow and we're like, oh my gosh, do we need to do the Moscow again? Because we haven't really prioritized effectively. So actually, one way that we found that really helps with that is having some underpinning the whole Moscow experience with 3 principles. Those principles might be around highlighting the original value outcome. It might be understanding what the level of risk is that you go through. So you go through the same kind of risk lens through each task, and it might be checking if what you're working on is an enabler to scale. So I'd say always underpinning a Moscow with principles is a really good way around that.
Nice.
Right. So now let's talk about our next topic, which is the emerging tech trends, and in particular AI, obviously, and ask ourselves the question: how can it support impact-driven business? Because unless you've lived in an AI fan bubble, you may have heard some concerns around the unsustainable energy requirements of AI, same in terms of resources, the issues with algorithmic bias, privacy, security, and so forth. So with that in mind, what are the keys to leveraging AI in an effective and ethical way in your scaling journey, again, as an impact business? And maybe let's first look at this question from a design and therefore user perspective with you, Joe.
Yeah, sure. I think the hype train has well and truly left the station with AI. Yeah, I think from a design research perspective, I think it definitely has its uses. I think it's a case of making sure that you don't think it's a use case for everything. Design-wise, it's not there yet in terms of being able to design for us. And I still think even if it does get to a point, maybe there's still going to be a lot of human intervention there.
So you still have a job in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, let's see. I mean, I'm talking near future in terms of next few years.
Yeah.
But I think the risks are there. I think from the health tech startup, actually, we're discussing with them because it's an AI based product, and the risk there was because it focused on health, was alienating disadvantaged members of the society, non-English speakers, because it was health tech and their experience. So it's really not forgetting that you need to look at that inclusion from social aspects, I think, is key, and a risk analysis on that, because and don't think it's going to solve all the problems for everyone, but really understanding the impacts there and who you can help and who you can't help, and seeing if people you can't help, that should you use the AI in the first place, is definitely a key thing. And then I think the other thing, there will be good use cases once the hype kind of dies down, I think, and maybe a bit of a .com style, but and prototyping definitely used. I think from trends wise, maybe with John Ivey being appointed at OpenAI, got a lot of press. Maybe a device light experience, so moving away from reliance on screens from a commercial consumer aspect could be a positive trend. Voice interaction then obviously got a lot of traction the last sort of 10 years with Alexa and things, which was not a great experience, but that's definitely improving with AI in terms of the voice interactions you can have. So that's definitely, I think, a trend that's going to continue to grow. And I think getting away from screens is no bad thing from a consumer's perspective.
For sure. And Josh, what are your thoughts on this from a tech perspective?
Yeah, well, I think I would call this more of a hype roller coaster than a hype train with the way things are going.
True.
We're definitely at the very top of the peak here at the minute, and as you could probably feel out in the world, things are starting just to tip over now into this downward slope, into the aptly named trough of disillusionment. There is obviously still a lot of hype around AI, but if I can get people to remember just one thing, and this is speaking as a technologist who is super excited about this kind of thing, is that AI really is just a tool. It's one component of many, and it's not the component. It's not the be all and end all of any product or software. Essentially, there's no intelligence behind AI, despite the name. And yes, it is sophisticated software, but that's all it is at the end of the day. It's not appropriate for every and all tasks. And even where it does make sense to use it, you're still going to have to scaffold a lot of systems, integrations, and human processes around it in order to get the most out of the technology. So I liken it a little bit to a power tool. You need to know how to use the power tool, or you're going to cause a mess, or potentially even injure yourself. And a good example of that is Klarna, who a few months ago decided they were going to get rid of something like 700 members of customer service staff and replace them with AI agents. And just recently have backtracked on that and decided that actually hasn't quite worked out the way that they imagined it would, and have started to rehire those individuals. So there is no silver bullet here. Don't buy the hype, keep your head, and figure out where best to use AI in a very surgical manner.
Right. I love this very pragmatic and reasonable advice from a tech leader. And also, so to my point on I think one of the main concerns people have is the user resources and energy that AI entails. And so how can we use it responsibly in impact scale-ups?
It's a really good point. Obviously, AI does have a pretty big impact. It does use a lot of resources, energy, water, and so on. But in short, you can absolutely use the technology in a responsible way. I think first and foremost, you have to remember not to use AI for everything. You want to be targeted about where you're applying AI, not wasteful. And that's really a key point with this. But just on the energy efficiency side of things, the models are improving at a really rapid pace at the moment. So an example of this, GPT-4o uses something like 10 times less energy per response than GPT-4 did. And 40 Mini is more like 200 times less. So the energy efficiency is improving massively. And actually, I noticed late yesterday that OpenAI have just announced that their 3.0 model, or O3, is now something like 80% more efficient than it was previously. The cost has come down massively, and this is partly because the model is significantly more efficient. So, this is almost on a monthly basis, things are improving. The thing is with AI, the genie is out of the bottle. Demand for quote unquote intelligence is really not going to go away. It's only going to increase the cheaper the technology becomes. And very much like electricity in the early years of electricity, we have the classic Jevons paradox. The more that the cheaper it becomes and the more efficient it becomes, the more we're going to want to use the technology because it is just so valuable. So yeah, it's not something that's going away.
Yeah, but yeah, let's be mindful of this rebound effect of in terms of use of energy and resources. So moving on, we could talk about AI forever, but let's talk about our last topic, which is how do you grow your team so they can work together to navigate the challenges of scaling up a business. So Rashmi, can you give us some insight into what an optimal tech and product teams look like? There's no one size fits all, obviously, but indication of size, roles, and mindset would be useful, I think, for our audience today.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you're right. I think it really does depend on what you're trying to build together. But generally, an optimal team is a cross-functional one. So you've got, multiple functions in there, whether that's, some technical leadership, some product leadership, and the engineering. And that engineering depends on what you're trying to build. So if it's a data-heavy project, you'd be looking at much more senior data engineering specialists. But I think in terms of, what are the qualities of an optimal team? And that really does come back to the hiring strategy, the technical hiring strategy. And we do place a lot of emphasis on that here. For me, a team that's conducive to building really strong products are the ones that, first of all, have fun doing it, but always keep the mission in view. But they really know their customer, and they actually use the products that they're creating, which we call dog fooding in the industry. And they measure outcomes, not velocity. For me, the optimal team isn't perfect, but it's one that continues to learn and is set up to learn. So I call the best teams eternal students, really. And so yeah, I think that's how I like to look at a good team.
Great. Joe, would you want to add some perspective from the design expert viewpoint?
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily design specific. I think obviously, if it's a product-based system or even a service-based system, you need a service designer or a product designer within the team. The ratio on that depends on the complexity, I suppose. There's no one size fits all. I think definitely I've seen mistakes made by company. I think we've probably all seen them where a scale-up company tries to hire too many people too quickly, as Rashmi alluded to. And so I think there's still a role there for consultants to help you out, to have that flexibility to get the help when you need it, but also not a rush of hires that can get quite expensive. So that can be consultants for user research, because user research is a role that is very much needed. But I think a lot of founders and startups find it hard to find the right level of work, I suppose, for that role. So it doesn't make sense necessarily to have it as a permanent member at that stage. Once you've moved beyond scale up, I think definitely hire user researcher. But at that point, definitely, still rely on consultants to be flexible.
Right. So yeah, be flexible, but make sure you have like some great people to represent the user at all times. Thanks for that. So then let's talk about, maybe as a last point in this theme of teams, what are the qualities maybe of a design or tech leader? Rashmi, would you mind giving us maybe your top three or four?
Yeah, sure. In my experience, the best tech and design leaders I've seen do three things really exceptionally well. One, and I talked about this throughout, is setting the context. So they don't just share, they don't just give you direction, they really share the story. They give you the why you're doing what you're doing and not just what the thing does. And I think that's really important. Two, I'd say they stay curious and they continue to listen. I've seen the best leaders never stop questioning, even if it means deviating against the roadmap. You know, ultimately they really want to solve the problem at hand, and so they will continue to stay curious and ask the right questions. And three, they lead with integrity and kindness and empathy. And I think I don't say that lightly. The best leaders really care about the health and well-being of teams, and that filters all the way through to technical hiring strategies. You know, making sure you're hiring for cultural fit just as much as competencies. And I have seen in companies where, you know, they might be in a rush again and they don't do this, they hire for the skills, but that has a damaging effect on the morale of the team. And, you know, so I do really think, especially in tech, I mean, people maybe underestimate just how important, you know, good, strong, happy people are. And that's what great leaders recognize the most.
And Josh, your take on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I think three things. A tech leader wants to be that translation layer between the business and technical worlds. They ought to use principles and systems thinking to simplify complexity. And really, they've got to have the technical credibility and the practical experience there. So those would be my top three.
Right. So if we summarize, the top qualities of leaders on the scaling journey are seeing and communicating the big picture and across the board, being this ability to translate as well. Collaborative, curious, empathetic, and I would also say talk the walk with those great stories and walk the talk, which is the integrity layer. With that, I'm going to thank you for your insight, and maybe we're going to open the floor to questions from the audience. So thanks for your time, dear speakers. And let's see, I know there's a few questions already there. Shall we take them from the start? Joe, I think there was one from Jan. Do you want to pick it up?
Yeah,
So
sure.
Jan was asking us, could you dive deeper into the systemic framework that you mentioned? How does that relate to the rest of the elements?
Yeah.
Excellent question.
Yeah, very good question. I think it's a question that could probably be a webinar in itself. But I think give the key highlights of how we can use it. So it really is the donut economics is the key one. I mean, there's the earlier regenerative one we showed that's very much more high level framing. The key one is the donut economics. I think the way to look at this, and I'll try to give you as quick rundown as I can, view it as initially mapping this to set constraints, both from the ecological things that you don't want to exceed as a business, and also the sort of social aspects, whether it's inclusion and other positive impacts that you want to make, and use those constraints. So whether it's for ecological, could be the net of emissions you don't want to go over across the supply chain and your own business. And social foundation could be the societal groups that you want to include, make sure are included from the start, and map that with the stakeholder mapping you can do specifically for those things. So we use non-human personas, which is broad speaking could be mapping forests, or you could even map the individual trees as a persona, and see, okay, what's the impact we're going to make? Are we not going to use wood from certain forests or supply chains from certain forests, for example? And then you can also map the human personas, but that aren't active users. So there's personas in your supply chain. So maybe your textiles company and one of your suppliers uses child labor in one of the supply chains. You kind of map that as a persona and use that as a way to firstly have that top of mind when you're doing the full process and building the business, but also use that as a kind of screening of any new features or changes in the business model, and see if that impacts those personas. It's quite complex. Probably need to talk about a couple of hours about it, but that's kind of the key highlights of roughly how to use it.
And if I can add on this, once you have this, that's going to help you frame your business model. That's going to help you create maybe like a service blueprint, and then you understand what needs to be built, and that will direct also the build, the tech strategy.
Message me, happy to talk to people that want to know more.
Thank you. There's another one from Peter to Josh. Do you have any example of what you'd consider wasteful usage of AI? Maybe one example.
Oh, just one. That's so hard. How do I pick just one? I mean, the thing is, I think it's very easy to use AI for anything and everything. You don't want to be generating masses of low quality AI slop content. You don't want to be dumping reams of data into LLMs and expecting it to unpick all of that. You don't want to be not caching the responses from the LLMs. There's a whole bunch of different things. It's an entire topic, but keeping it short, I just mentioned those ones.
Great. There was another question on discipline in tech. What you mean by having discipline in tech?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really interesting point. I mean, for me, that comes down to tracking and tackling technical debt. So fixing things as you go, refactoring, simplifying things. It's also implementing automated tests, but obviously an appropriate amount of automated testing to help manage change and improve the maintainability of the code base. And then investing in the software factory, so things like pipelines, deployments, etc. And of course, with very important, DevX, so the developer experience.
Right. And I think Peter had another question, which is also quite complex, but we'll try our best with regards to the hype and the topic of hitting a local top on AI hype. So does anyone have a take of what expectations are being unmet and or what gaps need to be filled before it continues its advancement?
This is another one. You could have an entire webinar just on this single topic. I think people don't yet understand the tasks that AI should really be applied to and where it shouldn't be applied to, where it's going to be most effective and where it's not, and even where it is effective, how to apply it to those problems. But certainly more of a topic than we can fit into a 5-second answer.
I mean, go for it, Joe. Yeah, no, I was just to jump in very quickly on this. I think hallucination, Josh, you always talk about this one, right? So at the moment, AI, especially OpenAI, ChatGPT, it's still hallucinating. So the kind of trustability around that and the reliability is still a problem, and that still needs to be met. I mean, we worked on a project whereby we automated a sustainability assessment in its entirety so that we completed all the answers automatically. We've got the chatbot to kind of trawl thousands of pages and answer the questions on behalf of analysts, which was great. It saved 75% of the time, but you can't trust it blindfolded, and so really there's a way to go with that to get confidence. There's no way to track or test it completely yet, and that's where more bespoke builds come into that, I think, for now, because you can add in some parameters and there's stuff that you can do manually to get more confidence. But I think for now you're really working on the less, humans still elevate the rest of the story, and I think so hallucination is a problem for a while. Joe, sorry.
Yeah, my 2 cents was just a bit the data privacy security element, like you said, Rashmi, in terms of being able to self-host LLMs and notice that make that easy. That's probably a gap. Biases, massive biases in them, in the main ones at least, which socially makes an issue. Definitely agree with the hallucination element. And there was one more that came to my head, but I forgot. Biases. No, it's gone. I forgot. There's a long list.
Yes, there's a long list. Indeed. So we might be able to take one more question. I think we're good with questions. Well, thank you for your great questions. And again, thank you, Josh, Rashmi, and Joe for your time and insight today. So again, thank you for your time, everyone. Keep on the good work and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.